Confession and issue a warning. If you have come here expecting something very deep and very serious, I'm afraid you will be disappointed. Because I think I shall be, what I say shall be simple and it will be clear. So you won't have to work very hard at it. Last year when I came here, there was a young girl. She's still young. She was 2 last year, she's now 3, I think. So she used to say, refer to me as grandpa without teeth. This time I had my teeth on. So she says, grandpa has teeth, but he's still an old man. So talking of old people, this really happened, and it's funny. A family member of ours, she's 90 now, so when this happened, she was around 80. She went to the dentist, and the dentist decided to have a tooth pulled out. But he says, you have come alone now, so I won't do it. Next time, have an appointment, come with somebody with you. I don't want you to be alone. See? So she said, fine. So for the next appointment, she took her mother with her. And the dentist was so angry. She sent her back with some excuse and wouldn't give her another appointment. And this lady used to visit us and say, I don't know, every time I call my dentist, the receptionist says she's gone to America or to England. So, being old is relative. So now, where do we begin? Normally I speak without notes, but in your honor I've made a few notes. I'll refer to them. Yes. Remember, I'm an old man, so I forget very quickly. Let me begin with how I started talking. I mean, not when I was a baby, but I'm talking about this subject. Believe me, I never intended to be a guru. I'm not a guru now. I never meant to talk. But as I say, everything happens. And in my case, what happened was this. At one time, my guru, Nisargadatty Maharadje, he was very ill. He used to lie down, people still used to come. The talks were on. So at one time, on a weekend, a group of 8 or 10 people have come from a place called Satara, about 250 miles from Bombay. And when they sat down, Maharaj told them, look, I'm not a well man, I'm sick. So don't ask questions in different words, the same question. So he said, talk amongst yourselves. Decide on a few questions, and I'll answer them. The talk went on for a few minutes. Then Maharaj had to go downstairs, probably to the toilet or somewhere. So for the first time, he never delegated his talk duties to anyone else. But for the first time that morning, he said, don't stop your talk, ask your questions. And he pointed to me and he said, he will answer them. Many people were surprised, but I was the one who was most surprised. Anyway, when Maharaj went downstairs, there were no questions. So obviously there were no answers. Then someone sitting next to me he said, look, Maharaj is going to get very angry when he comes up, when he sees there's no talking going on. So I said, well, so Maharaj came back, and as he predicted, he said, what's going on? What subject are we talking on? So I said, Maharaj, there were no questions, there were no answers. And he was angry. So I said, well, they probably didn't want any answers from a recording machine. But from his point of view, he had given me permission to talk, authority to talk. But this authority for one particular morning, I didn't take as a general authority. So I never talked, and Maharaj knew it. So the day before he died, he was so weak, his attendant had to take his ear close to Maharaj's mouth when he mumbled something, a drink of water or whatever. He was so weak. And then suddenly, he got up on his elbow and shouted at me in a voice which I hadn't heard, the strength of which I hadn't heard for almost 3 months. He shouted at me and he said, why don't you talk? And then he collapsed. And I honestly thought that was the end, but he lived for another 24 hours. But the significance of it was obvious. He said, I've given you the authority to talk, why don't you talk? So, that time I took it that I must obey my master and start talking. But I decided that I'm not going to invite listeners so that I can talk. So I decided I'll talk if people come. And one morning, while my wife and I were having breakfast, about 7 in the morning, the bell rang. I opened the door, and there was a young man standing there. So I invited him in. He was very apologetic that he had disturbed me at 7 in the morning. Then he said he had come from an ashram which was about 3 hours away. And he was there at 7 in the morning. So he must have left pretty early. And obviously hadn't had his breakfast. So while we sat there and started talking, my wife went and had some breakfast for him, which he gulped down very hungrily. Then we started talking, and it was an Australian young man, medical student, who had taken Sabbath leave for a year. And he was at the ashram. And he was there, that was his last week. So we talked for an hour, hour and a half. Then he left. And before he left, he said, can I come again? So I said, sure. So next morning, he telephones from this railway station. And he said, you gave me permission to come, so I've come. So I said, why telephone? So he said, can I bring 4 or 5 people with me? They're here. So I said, of course. And that's how the sad story began. 4 or 5 people came. But that was the last I saw of the Australian young man. But the others kept on coming. And that's how it began. And then one American he called from the States and he said he was on a world tour. Could he come and see me? So I said yes. So he came. He came for 3 days and he stayed on for 3 months. And that was how this story began. Then he took me to the States, and that's how the talking began. So that's how it was. So the first thing is, what is it that people seek in life? What they seek is money, wealth. I suppose because that's been their conditioning from the beginning. You have to work hard, make a lot of money. The only trouble with making a lot of money is that you want still more money. I'll tell you what happened when I was in Ahmedabad, my only transfer out of Bombay. It was an industrial town, textile town, lot of mill owners. So on one of my usual visits to a mill owner, we talked, and I congratulated him for his very good results that year. And I said, "You must be a wealthy man." I said, "What are you? How much do you have?" I said, 10 million rupees. It was a bit of a shock for him. He didn't realize how close I was to his 10 million rupees. So I said, "You must be very happy." He said, "Yes." He said, "Yes, but you see, my neighbor has 30 million. You see, the neighbor has 30 million. Then the same thing happens. I'll be happy with a nice little home, 2 bedrooms, car for a garage, garage for a car. And then he gets his little house, and a car for the garage, and a garage for the car. And then he says, "Well, if some guests come, I want to have at least 1 more bedroom, a bigger car, bigger garage, more cars." And this goes on. He's never satisfied. And yet, money is a relative factor. I told you about this mill owner in Ahmedabad. On the other side is a story. I visited my daughter in Bangalore quite some time ago, when the Indian rupee had some value. So there was a place, there's still a place, very well known for its excellent breakfast. So my daughter and I had been to this place. We had a good breakfast. We came out, and as we came out, there was an old man, obviously in poverty, and begging must have been new to him. He was very embarrassed. But when we came out, he put his hand out. My daughter opened her purse, found that she didn't have any change. So she took out a rupee note and gave it to him. So to find a rupee note in his palm brought tears to the old man's eyes. You see? 10 million rupees, he was a sorry man because his neighbor had 30 million rupees. And here was this man, really in tears, because someone was kind enough to give him a rupee note. So everything has a relative value. So what is What is man really looking for? So either he doesn't have, no amount of money is big enough. Now, I suppose a billionaire in the States will be very sorry when he compares himself with Bill Gates. I only have $3 billion. Bill Gates has 300, I don't know, 500. You see? So what does a human being want? Money. So this, either he is very dissatisfied, or a rare case, he is satisfied. Then what happens if he is satisfied with money? It may be a rare case, but I'll tell you what happens when a man has plenty of money. He's satisfied with the money. Many years ago, there was an actor called George Sanders. He was never the main character except in one series, The Saint or something like that. But he was always in demand, a very good actor, had plenty of work. He made a lot of money, very well known. And then he committed suicide. And in the suicide note, he said, I have everything in life. You name it, I've enjoyed it. And now I'm bored, so I'm committing suicide. In fact, I mean, this is a real story. He committed suicide because he had plenty of everything, and life didn't have any meaning. So the question really is, what is the human being really seeking? Life, what is happening to life now? Everything is faster and faster on land, air and water. Speed is everything. And the peculiar thing is, no one worries about the destination. Going faster and faster. Where to? And the destination is only death. So what is the human being looking for? The word is still happiness. And no one really knows what happiness is. Money doesn't bring happiness. That has been proved from experience. But recently, some time ago, a year ago maybe, I came across an article. It was a research done not by any Tom, Dick and Harry. It was done by the London School of Economics. Incidentally, I studied there. So it must be a good college. And this is the report. I had a copy of the report from the press. But reading a report from that press is one thing. But reading the same report, which I had reported in this book of mine, which is my latest book, called Sin and Guilt. I think it's available outside. Have you ever seen a harder sell than this? Anyway, the report is interesting. The report says, London, December 9, probably a year ago, may have been 99, I'm not sure, it could have been 98, but you see, the heading is, Bangladeshis are world's happiest people. Bangladeshis are the world's happiest people. The article says, would you believe it? Bangladesh is the happiest nation in the world. The United States, on the other hand, is a sad story. It ranks only 46th in the World Happiness Survey done by London School of Economics. It ranks only, that's way behind India, the 5th happiest place in the world, in spite of the dirt and the poverty and everything else. So that's way behind India, the 5th happiest place in the world, and others, including Ghana and Latvia, Croatia and Estonia. Research led by London School of Economics professors into the link between personal spending power and the perceived quality of life has conclusively proved that money can buy everything but happiness. The study revealed that people in Bangladesh, one of the poorest countries in the world, derive far more happiness from their small incomes than, for example, the British, 32nd on the list, do from their relatively large bank balances. In fact, people in most rich countries, including Austria, Netherlands, Switzerland, Canada, Japan and others, are much unhappier than their poorer counterparts in countries like the Dominican Republic and Armenia. Most unfortunate, however, are Russians and some other parts of the former Soviet Union. They are neither rich nor happy. Indicates the World Happiness Survey. Slovenia, Lithuania, Slovakia, Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Bulgaria and Moldova follow the United States in the list to bring up the rear. The study shows that although the British have twice as much more to spend in real terms compared with 40 years ago, the study shows that although the British have twice as much more to spend in real terms, in spite of the inflation, compared with 40 years ago, their perceived quality of life has not improved. Earlier surveys revealed that many Britons thought money could bring happiness. The new study shows that such a link still exists in some countries because a small increase in income can mean large improvements in lifestyle. So for that beggar, 1 rupee meant a lot. So it's not that money has no relation with happiness, but at the lowest, below the poverty line. However, beyond a certain income level, that direct relationship breaks down. According to the research, happiness in rich countries now is far more dependent on close personal relationships, good health, and job satisfaction. So what really is the human being seeking? Ramana Maharshi said, first find out who the seeker is. The human being as a seeker. So, he said, what is the human being? The mystic has always said, the human being is nobody, nothing. He is only a body-mind organism, uniquely programmed. But now the physicist tells us the same thing. He said, what is the human being? He said, it's almost nothing. He says the human beings are an insignificant aspect of the quantum he said, an insignificant aspect of the quantum flux. When I read that, I thought, the physicist says quantum flux, the mystic might want to say cosmic flux. Seething particles in an ocean of seething particles. Human beings, seething particles in an ocean of seething particles. So without the ego, what is the human being? What I have been saying for some time is, without the ego, the human being is no more than a uniquely programmed instrument, a computer or a robot. He is uniquely programmed according to my concept being the unique genes or DNA in every human body, which is unique. The DNA, I'm told, in any body is unique. There are no two human bodies with the same DNA, so unique as that. And the environmental conditioning. That is my concept of what the human being is without the ego. You had no choice about being born to particular parents in a particular environment. So you had no choice about the genes or the DNA. Similarly, you had no choice about the environment in which you were born. Mind their heads. So you have no choice about your genes or DNA, and you had no choice about the environmental conditioning that each of us has received in that environment over which we had no control. Environmental conditioning from day one, at home, in society, in school, in church or temple. Continuous conditioning, a bombardment of conditioning. You must do this, you mustn't do that. You must do this, you mustn't do that. So what is the human being without the ego other than a uniquely programmed instrument or computer or machine? A writer has put it very beautifully. He said, the human being is a human mechanism. And in that mechanism, there is a mechanism which prevents the human mechanism from seeing its mechanistic nature. A human mechanism in which there is a mechanism which prevents the human mechanism from seeing its mechanistic nature. And that mechanism which prevents the human being from seeing its mechanistic nature is what we generally call the ego. The ego is a sense of personal doership. There is a certain amount of misconception about the ego. The ego, according to my concept, is not merely identification with a name and form. That is how the ego is usually misconceived. The ego is an identification with a particular body and mind as an individual entity, separate from all other entities, but more importantly, with a sense of personal doership. So the core of the ego is not identification with a body, mind, organism, but the sense of personal doership. What differentiates an ordinary man from a sage? If a sage is called by name, whether it is Moses or Jesus Christ or Muhammad or Ramana Maharshi or Ramakrishna Paramahamsa or whoever, if he is called by name, he responds. Therefore, the fact that a sage responds to his name being called means there is still a very clear identification with a particular body, mind, organism and a name as an entity separate from all other entities in the world. So, the question will be raised, then what do they mean when they say that a sage doesn't see any separation between him and the rest of the world? He does see the separation between he as an entity and the others as separate entities. But what he sees as separate, where the sage sees separation, is only in the appearances of the human mechanisms. They are separate. He sees the separation between the appearances. Where he sees no separation is from the fact that they are all human mechanisms through which the same energy, the same consciousness, the same God functions and brings about actions which the individual considers his actions. So the separation is only in the appearances. What the sage understands and the ordinary man does not understand is that the human being truly has no sense of, has no real doership. The only doer is the source from which the manifestation has appeared. A manifestation being the totality of objects, and the human being is one species of object, but nonetheless an object. The human being is really a human mechanism, a particular species of object. And a species of object can have no sense of doership. So the next question that would arise is, why did the source create the ego? And the answer is, without the ego, life as we know it cannot happen. The Hindu word Leela, God's game, would not happen. Life as we know it can happen or happens only because of interhuman relationships. Without interhuman relationships, friendship and enmity, love and hate, acceptance, non-acceptance, that wouldn't happen. And without interhuman relationships, life wouldn't happen. And without the egos, interhuman relationships wouldn't happen. Therefore, the ego had to be created, and the source created the ego. And at the same time, again according to my concept, the source started the process of destroying the sense of personal doership in a limited number of cases. And in those limited number of cases, the body-mind organisms concerned are so uniquely programmed that this kind of seeking can happen. So what is the seeking? What is the spiritual seeking? Given various names, generally called happiness. But happiness is a term which has varied meanings and significance. The Buddha started his search from scratch. And his search began through seeing that there was great suffering in the world. So, the Buddha's famous saying, samsara is dukkha, life is suffering. And the peace that you seek, the human being seeks, is nirvana. Nirvana is shanti. Samsara is dukkha. Samsara is suffering, and nirvana is peace. But he added, they are not two. In other words, as I always tell people who come to visit me in Bombay, it is not that Bombay is dukkha, so you leave Bombay and go to Switzerland for peace. So he said, they are not two, which is the important point. So, Buddha made it clear. You have to seek the peace of nirvana while necessarily, compulsorily living your life with the attendant misery. So the question really boils down to who is seeking what? As I said, the seeking was started by the source when the sense of personal doership was created. In other words, what I am saying is that the individual considers himself the seeker. You find some people seeking money, some people seeking fame. Tiger Woods in golf, someone else in tennis, someone else in swimming, someone else in music. But according to my concept, there is truly no seeker. Seeking is happening through a particular body-mind organism, because that body-mind organism has been so programmed that that kind of seeking can happen. So there is truly no seeker. And you can everyone has recognized it from his personal experience. But this personal experience is somehow gets ignored. I'll give you an example. My nephew is a pediatrician, a children's specialist. And when he was 5 years old, at that time, all three of our brothers were married, we had children, we had a big apartment, and we lived together as a joint family. So, any child, for him, there were 3 mothers and 3 fathers. They could go to anyone they liked. So my nephew, his name is Mahesh, he somehow liked me. And in the morning, he would come and sit on my lap, and we would talk. And there was a particular abhanga, some verse, which I liked from Shankaracharya. So it became a habit of my reciting it when Mahesh was on my lap. He picked it up. So one morning, he tells me, he was probably 5 years old. So he said, uncle, I want to be a doctor. So I said, why, Mahesh? You want to make a lot of money? So he said, no. I want to cure people. At the age of 5, how could a child say that he wanted to be a doctor unless there was something in that body-mind organism beyond his control which made him want to be a doctor in order to cure people? And now, before reaching the age of 40, he's probably at the top of his profession. And whereas many other doctors would remove the phone during the night, he gets a call at 11:30 and his child is ill, someone's child is ill. I'll be there in 10 minutes. So he really is a very good doctor. But that doesn't mean he's not making money. He's making a lot of money too. But he is a very good doctor. And what I'm saying, he's a very good doctor because the source programmed the body-mind organism to produce a very good doctor. So even the spiritual seeking that is happening. And it is only when the supposed seeker realizes that there never was a seeker, but that the seeking was going on, because that is what the source wanted, then the seeking stops. Because in the seeking, the sense of personal doership is the problem. And the sense of personal doership is everybody's experience, right from childhood. It is there. If only the ego would see it in everybody's experience. The ego wanted something, the ego worked hard for it, and he never got it. Sometimes, for various reasons, he or she didn't work too hard, and yet everything happened. So everybody in his experience knows that his success or failure does not have too much to depend on his personal effort. But the conditioning of thousands of years has been, you must work hard, you must be successful, and nobody is going to offer you success on a platter. So the sense of personal doership is the real problem in seeking self-realization, enlightenment, or whatever. So if you are seeking enlightenment or self-realization, my real question, this is not a flippant question. My question is, why do you want enlightenment? Why do you want self-realization? And there's tremendous confusion and misconception about enlightenment. The worst misconception, I think, according to my concept, is that the seeker who is still very much there, wanting self-realization, expects himself to be the perfect human being, which is ridiculous. Some time ago, I read a story about Buddha. Story is a fact. The Buddha tried everything. His search was, I doubt if any seeker suffered as much as the Buddha did. Everything was from personal experience. So he tried torturing the body. So he started on a particular day. He will give up food and drink. And for this someone who is starving, and by that time he had acquired a certain amount of fame. And as he continued day after day, lots of people gathered. He had a large following. And then, one night, out of sheer exhaustion, he collapsed. And in the early morning, there were some milkmaids going to the market with their milk. And one of them found this body lying unconscious. She saw that he was not dead, he was unconscious. So what this milkmaid did was to open his lips and drop a few drops of milk. Soon he recovered enough. So she says, the milkmaid said, I have to go to the market. Is there something I can do for you before I go? And the Buddha said, yes, please leave some milk in some vessel. So she left the milk. And he continued. He broke his fast. And when he broke his fast, all his followers left him. He's just like us. He has to eat. So the misconception that I'm saying is that a sage is a perfect human being. He doesn't get angry. You slap him on one cheek, he offers the other cheek. He doesn't have any desires. And when he finds, people used to, my guru, Nisargadatty Maharadje, had a short fuse. Anger would arise pretty quickly. And one old lady, a foreigner, she had one of these mistakes. So she asked Maharaj, he said, you smoke? He said, do you drink alcohol? He said, no. And you get angry? and you do this. So that is your usual life? He said, yes. So she got up and walked away. So the misconception is that the sage is a perfect human being. Others had even more weird ideas. If a sage is not able to walk on water, he is no sage. And my whole point is, the sage continues to be the same human body, mind, organism, same programming as was there before the self-realization happened. Ramana Maharshi was a very quiet and calm person. And people thought it was self-realization that made Ramana Maharshi the way he was. But it wasn't. He was made like that. His programming was the same even before his self-realization. And he said the other day, I read somewhere, he was never a seeker. Ramana Maharshi was never a seeker. He never did any sadhana. He never did any spiritual practice. He didn't torture his body. He did nothing. And yet, the one simple experience happened, and there it was. So, when people ask me, what is the truth? So I said, I have two truths. One is the nominal truth, and the other is the phenomenal truth. The nominal truth is that the consciousness or the source or primal energy is the only reality. Whether you call it the source, primal energy as the scientist would like it, or consciousness as the Hindu Upanishads say, is the only truth. Everything else is a concept. And the conceptual truth in phenomenality, according to my concept, is 4 words in the Bible. Thy will be done. In other words, nothing can happen unless it is the will of God. And if something has happened, it could not have happened unless it was the will of God. In other words, no human being has truly the power to do anything. The sense of doership is purely the ego, which is a concoction created by divine hypnosis. The Hindu word for it is Maya. There is truly no doer other than God. And it is exactly the same thing in all the other religions. The Hindu religion says, thou art the doer, thou art the experiencer. Similar thing in the Muslim religion. I don't remember the exact words, but all it means is all there is God. Exactly the same thing. And yet, we've had religious wars for centuries. Same basic principle in every religion, and yet we have religious wars. Why? According to my concept, you see, I keep saying my concept for this reason. It is not the truth. The truth is only that the source is the only reality, which in phenomenal truth, in phenomenally is interpreted as I am. Again, the two words from the Bible. I am, I exist. The impersonal awareness of existence in phenomenality is the only truth. Other than that, whatever any sage has said at any time, whatever any scripture of any religion has said at any time, is a concept. So why have there been religious wars? The reason I have is that the essential truth in the 4 words, thy will be done, needs no interpretation, but each religion has interpreted it, and the interpretation by interpreters throughout the history is responsible for the religious wars. Thy, what interpretation does it mean? Thy will be done. And yet, it has been interpreted to say that God only does good things. If a woman, the woman has been programmed to have children. So, if a woman does not find a mate and cannot get married and have children, it is not God's will. That is an interpretation I have seen. And God has done that so that the woman can use that to improve herself. And the question was never answered in where I read it. Supposing the poor woman says, I don't have the strength to bear it. I have to have sex. I have to have a lover. That is not accepted. If she confesses, I just don't have the ability to bear it. I don't have the courage. I don't have the forbearance. That is not acceptable. In other words, the interpretation is to limit God's power of action. The interpretation limits God's will to particular things as interpreted by the interpreter. And that is why. And my point is that it is extremely simple. Thy will be done. Which means my will cannot prevail unless my will corresponds with God's will. Then my will happen. Otherwise my will not happen. So if some action happens, it could only have happened because it is God's will. There is an incident about Ramana Maharshi. But before I tell this incident, there is another small thing which I came across. 3 lines. I read only the other day, narrated by Ramana Maharshi. At one point, an 8-year-old child came to him and he says, "Grandfather, will you touch me?" Ramana Maharshi was touched, moved, and he touched his arm. 8-year-old child, mind you. And he said, "Tata, grandfather, you have only touched my arm. You have only touched my arm. You haven't touched me." Now, that kind of understanding, could an 8-year-old child have achieved it? or did it come with the programming? So the other incident that I was telling is, many years ago, probably Ramana Maharshi died in 1950. So it was a long time before that, early part of the century I would imagine. A young man comes to him, to Ramana Maharshi, young man, newly married, and he confesses. He says, I'm newly married, I love my wife, and yet I'm tempted by the breasts of a young neighbor. And this must have been in Kerala, where the established practice, early part of the century and later part of the 19th century, was for all respectable women to go bare-breasted. And it was only the woman of bad virtue who covered her body, probably to tempt people. So, this young man confesses. He says, I don't want to commit adultery, but I'm afraid of committing adultery. And Ramana Maharshi must have been touched, moved by the sincerity in the young man. So Ramana Maharshi's reply is classic. He says, you are always pure. You are always pure. And if adultery happens, don't think about it. If adultery happens, the word is happens. Don't think about it. So this sense of personal doership is the only point. And if one is able to truly accept that any action which happens through his body, mind, organ, or anyone else could not have happened unless it is the will of God. If one is able to, and that ability, the capacity to accept it, is also not in your power. Even that is God's will. To be able to accept God's will is God's will. But if you are able to accept it, then one thing is certain. You will never ever have to say to God, I'm sorry. If you truly accept that any action which happens through any body, mind, or organism, if it has happened, it could not have happened unless it was God's will. Then why should anybody have to say, I'm sorry to God? But the more important point is, the question arises. Suppose, I'm not saying that I'm able to accept it totally, but if I am able to accept that no one is a doer, all actions happening through any body, mind, organism are God's actions, how will it give me the peace of nirvana? I still live my life in the world, and as the Buddha says, life is misery. So, I live my life, I'll still suffer misery. So accepting that nothing can happen except God's will, how will it give me the peace of nirvana? Very valid question. And the answer is, the Buddha distinguishes from the misery of samsara, the misery of life, and the suffering. The misery is something which happens to the body, mind, organism. It is the ego, the sense of personal doership, who says he or she is suffering. I remember once, towards the last part of his last few days of his life, Maharaj was mourning, the body was mourning. So someone, with tears in his eyes, asked, Maharaj, are you in great pain? And the spontaneous answer was, spontaneous, I was there. Yes, there is great pain. Are you in great pain? The spontaneous answer, yes, there is great pain. So the pain was there, but the suffering was not. So the question is, if I am able to accept no one does anything, neither me, nor you, nor he or she, how will it get me the peace of nirvana? Valid question. The answer is, the peace of nirvana, according to my concept, is the absence of the load of pride and arrogance, guilt and shame for actions which happen through one's own body, mind, organism, which I think is my action, and hatred and jealousy for actions which happen through some other body, mind, organism. So what happens when this sense of personal doership has really totally been lost? Then an action happens through this body, mind, organism, which is accepted by society. Society acclaims it. Ramesh should be honored. This action has been wonderful. So what happens? The applause of the society is an input in this body-mind programmed instrument or computer. The brain reacts to the acclaim from society, and a sense of pleasure arises. Quite frankly, when in Bombay, there's a smaller group, and I can see the words go straight home to the heart. Tears come, there is total acceptance. Seeing that action, seen action, is an input in this body-mind organism. The brain reacts to it with a sense of pleasure, even a sense of gratification. But knowing totally that the words that come out are not my words, how can there be a sense of pride, let alone arrogance? So, an action is accepted by society, a sense of pleasure, but not pride. The other way around. All action is God's action. So an action happens which is not acceptable to society according to the prevailing rules of conduct. The society says that is a bad action. So, the disapproval of the society is an input in the body-mind organism. The brain reacts to it with a sense of regret. A sense of regret and even sympathy. But not a sense of guilt. Why should I feel guilty about something which God has done? So a sense of regret, but not guilt. For actions which happen through this body-mind organism, there is no pride, there is no sense of guilt. And for actions which happen through another body-mind organism, if an action which happens through another body-mind organism, where this understanding is not there, the other person may have wanted to hurt me and is probably delighted that he has succeeded in hurting me. But I know that it cannot be his action. If it were not God's will that I be hurt, no power on earth can hurt me. So the hurt has happened. I accept that hurt as God's will. But knowing that it is not anyone's action which has hurt me, how can I possibly hate anybody? Anger may be, anger may arise, but hatred, no. Similarly, jealousy or envy. So what is the result of accepting that no one can do any action, neither me, nor you, nor he or she? What happens? Pleasure or pain, regret, hurt, yes. Which is the misery of samsara. But there is peace of nirvana in the absence of pride and arrogance, guilt and shame, hatred and jealousy. There is misery of life, but not the load of sin and guilt and pride and jealousy and hate. That is where you have the peace of nirvana while still living in the world, samsara, of dukkha or misery. And that is truly the only thing that self-realization can get you. If you expect something more than that, I wouldn't say you will be disappointed. I would say you will never be self-realized. Because self-realization to me means the total acceptance of non-doership for anybody. Total sense, we can say acceptance, you can say surrender, you can say anything you like. So surrender, that reminds me of a story which I've told a number of times. And that is, a man was wandering about on a hill alone. He comes to the edge to see what's around. He slips, falls, and grips something, stone, with his two hands. No one there. So he shouts, "Anybody up there? Anybody up there?" Then he hears a sound. "Yes, I'm here. I shall save you, but you must do exactly what I say." "I'll do anything, anything." "All right, drop your grip." The voice says, "Drop your grip. Open your hands." So no sound for a couple of seconds. Then he says, "Anyone else up there?" So even that surrender is truly not in your hands. Even that surrender or acceptance can happen only if it is God's will and the destiny of that body-mind organism. One last point remains, and after that we are free to ask questions. Another valid question. All right, Ramesh, he said, you have proved that the total acceptance means no pride, no guilt, no shame, no hatred, no jealousy, and that means peace. But what if I'm not able to surrender? How do I? Intellectually I accept it. It's quite right, I accept it. Intellectually. But next time someone calls me a name, I'm ready to hit him. So how do I get that total acceptance? And the answer is, the total acceptance can come not because Ramesh tells you, or the Buddha tells you, or Ramana Maharshi tells you, but only from personal experience. Therefore, you have to find out from your own personal experience whether at any time an action that you think is your action truly was your action. Take any action. If you are busy during the day, at the end of the day, sit for 10, 20 minutes think of one action or two actions or more, which you are convinced is your action. Then investigate that action. We come to Ramana Maharshi's famous question, who am I? Which means, who is this me? And who is this me who thinks he or she is the doer? Find out if there is truly any me as the doer from personal experience. And I guarantee, every action, if we have done the investigation thoroughly and honestly, you have to come to the conclusion that the action began because of a certain happening over which you had no control. A thought came to you, you have no control over what thought comes. Something was seen or heard. That was the input in that body-mind organism. The brain reacted to it, which resulted in the action which you think is your action. And every single action, I repeat, I guarantee, if the investigation is thorough and honest, you will come to the conclusion that what started the action was not in your control. So how can you call it your action? So day after day, action after action, you come to the conclusion that no action was your action. Then at some point, again depending on God's will and the destiny of the body-mind organism, the ego asks himself, if I have personally from my own experience come to the conclusion that no action is my action, obviously no action is anyone else's action either. And if no me is necessary for actions to happen, who is this me? Is there a me at all for life to happen, for events to happen, for actions to happen, for deeds to happen? And the only answer is no. No me is truly necessary. And until this conviction becomes total, pure, unadulterated misery, until the answer comes from the source. And the answer comes from the source only when the source wants it. And only when the answer comes from the source. My dear child, there has never been any me to suffer. You have been suffering unnecessarily. The only doer is I. I am the only doer. I don't need any me to do any of my work. You see? And if this ego had then now asked God, then God, why did you create me? God would probably have said, in order to suffer. In order to suffer and come to the conclusion that there is no sufferer, there is no doer. So the point of any spiritual seeking is for the seeker to come to the conclusion that never has been a seeker either for self-realization or for any other wanting. Then, when the seeker disappears, no me is necessary for events to happen, then the ego, now without the sense of personal doership, what remains of the ego after self-realization is mere identification with a body-mind organism, so that the body-mind organism can live for the rest of its allotted span of life. Identification with a name and form continues, but without the sense of personal doership. Therefore, without the load of sin and guilt and jealousy and hatred. So this can happen only if it is God's will. That's all I have to say at this moment. So, any questions? Yes, please. Now, wait a minute. You'll have to have the mic.
You said you guarantee that you will investigate thoroughly the start of the action.
Yes, but wait a minute. I said, provided the investigation is thorough and honest. And the investigation cannot be thorough and honest unless it is God's will. Now, what is your question?
Right. There's still something to say there.
I'm sorry?
I will keep the other question. Taking in mind this clarification, of course. But you said the start of the action.
Yes.
Is there any differentiation between the start of an action and the process of completion of this action?
No, there may be. There may or may not be. But the start of the action is not in your control. And in many actions you will find that the progress of the action also has not been strictly according to your will.
But
The start of the action itself is because of some happening over which you have no control. A thought, something seen or heard.
You said may or may not be. So in which case could that be may?
It may or may not, depending again on God's will. You see, the progress may be smooth or the progress may be difficult. For the completion of the action, that's what you're saying. The beginning of the action and the completion of the action.
Yes.
So, whether it is smooth or rough, again will depend on God's will and the destiny of this body-mind organism, which is the same thing. God's will in respect of each human body-mind organism is the destiny of that body-mind organism. You see, in India, I think probably a year ago, in a troubled state in Orissa, a clergyman, Staines, and his 2 children, I think, by terrorists, they were locked up in the car and the car was set fire. You see? Next day, some reporters went to the bereaved widow and mother for her comments. And I was amazed, truly amazed, when this bereaved widow and mother gave the answer. They died because their allotted span of life, according to God's will, had ended. Can you believe it? The bereaved widow and mother said, they died because God's allotted span of life for them came to an end. Truly the deepest possible understanding. Not theoretically, but in the worst possible circumstances. So the understanding was there, it had happened.
Thank you.
Yes.
So you're speaking of God's will, so who is God?
God is the source or primal energy. It's a good question. Because very often the word God is used as a misconception. For most people, when they use the word God, they think of God as an all-powerful entity connected with the manifestation and its functioning. But for me, God is another synonym, another name for the source from which the entire manifestation has emerged. Not an entity, not the chief executive officer of the manifestation. The source from which the entire manifestation has come. But the ordinary person uses the word God as a misconception. Was that your question?
Yes, so
But what I mean by the word God is the source or primal energy, as the scientist would prefer.
so my mind still wants to wrap around and create a picture of that.
That is the whole problem. No, I'm not joking. That is truly, my dear, the only problem, which is what you want spiritually, your mind wants a visual picture of it. Enlightenment, what is it? I want to know. I want to see. So, how can a created object ever see a visual picture of the source which created this created object? How can a created object ever know or see the creator's subject? Impossible. When I mentioned this some time ago, there was a couple from Vienna. The man had a lot of resistance. He was asking questions all the time. But the wife, I could see she had understood. She was very quiet. On the last day, when she was almost at the door, she comes back and says, Ramesh, let me ask you just one question. What you are saying about the created object, am I right in saying, if I paint a picture, and in that picture I paint a human figure, what you are saying is, the human figure in my painting can never know why I painted the picture and painted the figure the way I have done. I said, Hela, I think her name, Hela, you couldn't have put it better. Thank you very much. I'll use it many more times. That's exactly it. A created object can never know the basis on which the will of the creator subject works. Now, will of the creator subject, will of the source, God's will, I know it creates a certain mental problem. You see? Because the significance of somebody's will against my will. I think a friend of mine said, the way you have put it, I feel I'm always in competition with God. So I said, I'll put it another way. Instead of saying God's will, would you like it if I said according to the cosmic law? No human being can ever know the cosmic law. You see? So when I mean God's will is the cosmic law or the natural law or whatever.
Okay.
But that really is the problem. The mind or intellect wants everything visualized, pictured. You see?
Right, so I want to say, oh, so is it chaos? Is it, I'm still, I hear you say I can't know that,
Yeah.
but I still am trying to know that.
That is, I told you, that's the problem. That's the problem. You see, now, chaos, that the usual thing is, if nobody has any self-will, nobody has the power to do anything. If no human being has free will, there'll be chaos in this world. So I ask, what is it now with your free will? With your free will, is the state in a wonderful state or is it still chaos? Yes, please.
Yes.
Yes.
And so in your concept, what function has a sadhana? For instance, meditation or meditation on a mantra, meditation on a picture
Yes.
of a saint, or doing asanas.
Yes.
What kind
Or
of purpose?
doing japa.
Or doing,
I'll help
yes,
you.
right?
I'll help you. Or doing japa. You see? The answer is extraordinarily simple. To be able to do that japa or to be able to do that meditation with the intensity that it needs is not in your control. You see?
So
Meditation, if it happens, then what is pure meditation? What is pure meditation according to me is when there is no meditator. Meditating with a view to get something. Only that meditation is pure and therefore effective. When there is no individual meditator all the time saying, I am meditating. I have meditated for 2 hours. Pretty soon I'll be able to meditate for 4 hours. And therefore, it is not to give me what I want. That is not meditation.
So it's God's will if I do meditation, for instance. And
Sure.
if it's not God's will, I
It
wouldn't
is,
meditate.
but what I'm saying is the intensity with which the meditation will happen also depends on God's will and your destiny, which is the same thing. You see? So how successful that meditation will be, how successful this investigation of your actions will be, will depend on the destiny of this body-mind organism and God's will.
Thank you.
Sir, I am totally not familiar with your philosophy. You may excuse my question, but what is the reason?
I think you're holding it too close to your mouth.
What is a reason for us to be down on earth, to be here down on earth? What, if everything is God's will?
Yes.
Why we have to be here? So
Why?
why?
I know.
Because
Why are we here?
yeah.
Who is this we? Who wants to know? I kept repeating, a created object wants to know. Who wants to know, my friend? Who wants to know? A body-mind organism, a created object in this totality of objects which is manifestation, one created object wants to know, why have I been created? Exactly, you see, if you were a sculptor and you create a human figure in wood or metal or whatever, can that figure, sculpted figure which you have created, ever know why you have created the figure at all? And if you had to create a figure, did you have to create that figure so ugly? Did you have to create me such an ugly? Couldn't you have made me a little better? A little more acceptable, a little more handsome? You see, that is exactly what it is coming to. A created object cannot know the will of the creator subject. That is the whole point. And because the created object wants to know this, life goes on. If nobody had any question, life wouldn't go on. That is why there are very few spiritual seekers. In the Bhagavad Gita, there is a verse which is very relevant. Lord Krishna says, among thousands of people, there is one spiritual seeker. And among thousands of seekers, there is hardly one who knows me in principle. Means who knows the truth in principle, or who knows the source in principle. That is the way it is. Like Meister Eckhart, the German mystic, has said, all that the human being can do is to wonder and marvel at the magnificence and diversity of God's creation. The diversity of God's creation, which contains always at any time both the interrelated opposites. There is no moment in history when only one thing prevailed, only goodness prevailed, no evil, only beauty prevailed, no ugliness, only Adams prevailed, no Eves. How can there be a life? You see? So the basis of life is interconnected opposites existing at the same time every moment. And the problem arises because the ego chooses one against the other. The only difference, according to my concept, between a sage and an ordinary man is the sage accepts the duality of the manifestation. The ordinary man chooses between the interconnected opposites and lives in dualism. The sage lives in duality, accepts that there are interconnected opposites all the time. That life means sometimes pleasure, sometimes pain. You see? So the ordinary man is not prepared to accept the interconnected opposites happening at the one and always says, why did God create handicapped children?
But when I understand you correctly, the basic headline of your message is...
I'm sorry?
Your basic headline of your message is that the book of our life is already written when we are born.
Yes, sir.
So
No, slight mistake. Before you were born.
Before we are born even.
Yes. Even your birth is part of that writing. Why? Don't ask me.
But even during this life, even my thoughts are written in the book.
Yes.
Yeah? Even my thoughts.
Yes.
So
which lead to actions.
okay, so I go through the life, I think what I have to think, and I discover what I have to discover, and then I die. What is the reason? What is the reason for it?
Who wants to know, my friend? Who wants to know? A created object wants to know why he has been created. So your sculpted figure wants to know why we have created the figure. It's not possible, you see. That's yeah. So when the intellect truly gives up, then something will happen. If the intellect is able finally to give up, then something may happen, if it is God's will.
Thank you.
Okay. First, I want to give you all the love from my mother to you. Okay. And
Thank you. Do I know your mother? Has she come to Bombay?
No.
Oh, I see.
No. And that is the reason for my mother that I am here now.
I'm sorry?
For my mother, I am here.
Oh, you represent your mother?
No. No, I would like to represent my mother. Maybe, yes, I represent my mother.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then you're welcome. And give my love to your mother.
I will do it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, there is... Okay, for a long time ago, I have reading or I know that I am not the door. Yeah? I am not the door of my actions. Yeah?
That you had the conviction.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, but I have seen in my action that when I made maybe bad action or I'm
Yes.
a jealous
Yes.
man or hypocrite. Hypocrite is the word when I am not say the truth really because I am thinking something but I am saying another things. After some time I think, okay, but I am not the door. So there's no problem. But
That is your experience, you mean?
yeah. So
Mean-
after that, I have thought that maybe I'm going to continue make it, bad things. I'm trying to make it like that is a small thing because I am doing that. So maybe there is no progress in that way, yeah. So someday I hear that maybe we have to act like we don't know that we are not the door. To trying to find out what really we are doing.
So, frankly, that is the only spiritual practice I recommend. That is to find out whether any action is your action through an investigation, an analysis of your own actions,
Yeah.
and find out. And the success, I have already said, it's the success of that investigation depends again on the destiny of this body, mind, organ, and God's will.
Yeah.
But that is the only spiritual practice I recommend according to my concept.
Yeah.
Find out if in any action you truly have been the doer.
Yeah.
And my total conviction is if that investigation is thorough and honest, which itself depends on God's will, the conclusion has to be that what you thought was your action was not your action.
Thank you.
Ramesh, honestly, I really didn't want to be here today. I was brought here by my boyfriend because I don't like places like that filled with people sitting around a guru. So, do you think we need gurus?
Well, if you think you need a guru, you need a guru. If you think you don't need a guru, I suggest that you don't go to a guru. But if a guru is to happen to you, the guru will happen to you.
My goodness, you happened to me. Okay.
I always thought about grace when I read your book about consciousness speaks.
Yes.
You spoke about grace, and according to your concept, I think grace is not possible because if this body, mind, organism is empowered to get enlightenment, so it gets enlightened, but that's not grace.
You're talking of God's grace?
Yes.
Is that what you're talking
Yes,
about?
that's right.
Well, you see, God's grace and God's will is the same thing interpreted by the individual.
Mhm.
You
Okay.
see?
Okay.
If
it's-
something good happens to me,
it's
I
grace.
say God's grace. If something
But-
not so good happens to me, God's will.
Yes, but for our understanding, grace is something personal. A personal God with a long white beard says, okay, you get enlightened, but that's not grace. So it's maybe a misunderstanding of the word grace. Yes?
It is indeed the misunderstanding of the word for this reason that you say, I believe in God's grace. I believe in God's grace. Therefore, it's God's responsibility to be always good to me. I believe in you. It's your responsibility not to forsake me.
Yeah. Thank you.
When you say there is no guilt and no sin,
Yes.
there won't be any responsibility also. And when there is no responsibility, I can do anything I like and say,
Yes.
okay, it's the will
Sure.
of God.
I'll word your question for you. Your question is, if I'm not responsible for my actions, what is to prevent me from taking a machine gun,
Yeah,
going out and killing 20 people, right?
yeah, that's right. I was thinking of killing people. Yes, it's really right.
I told you, I'll word your question for you. If I'm not responsible for my actions, what is to prevent me from taking a machine gun, going out and killing 20 people?
Right.
You know what will prevent you? Your programming.
Excuse me, my?
Your programming.
Ah,
Only
okay.
a psychopath will go and do it. Because that
But-
psychopath is programmed to do that. An ordinary person cannot do it, even if he is given pardon, anticipatory pardon. An ordinary person is not programmed to do something like that. Only a psychopathic organism will do it. And the psychopathic organism is still entitled to ask, not my action, why should I be punished? Isn't it? Even the psychopath is entitled to ask, if it is not my action, as you say, it's God's action, why should I be punished? And you know the simple answer to that? There is no you to be punished.
Okay.
An action happens through a particular body-mind organism because it is God's will. And the consequences of that action are also God's will. There is no you involved. There is no you at all. An action happens through a body-mind organism because it is God's will. And the consequences of that action, not only to the body-mind organism through which it has happened, but others, many others. All the consequences to whichever body-mind organism concerned are all God's will. Therefore, not every criminal is detected and sentenced, whereas sometimes, not too infrequently, innocent people are punished. Why? It's God's will. And we cannot possibly understand why God has done what He has done. Why? Because our intellect is so narrowly focused, whereas God's will is for all eternity. You see? So how can a human being with a limited intellect ever know the will of God, which is total eternity?
But when everything is so determined, why should I struggle to go on? Why should I go on seeking?
Why? Good question. Good question. The answer is you don't struggle.
Excuse me? I don't.
You don't struggle. The energy inside this body-mind organism will make that body-mind organism struggle. Why? Because that is the programming in this body-mind organism. What really functions, which you say you will do or you will not do, it is truly only the impersonal energy or God or the source which is functioning, and functioning according to the cosmic law of God's will. There is truly, honestly, truly no you. The impersonal energy is functioning through every human body-mind organism and bringing about such actions as are supposed to happen according to the cosmic law. In the words of the Buddha, events happen, deeds are done, but there is no individual doer thereof. That is the Buddha for you.
Okay.
Events happen, deeds are done, but there is no individual doer thereof. And I am prepared to take the Buddha's word.
Okay, thank you. You helped me a lot.
Ramesh, you pointed out that what happens to me depends from my destiny, my program, and God's will.
Yes.
I can't see the difference between my destiny and God's will because my destiny is God's will.
That is correct. It's the same thing.
Yes.
You see, God's will in respect of each body-mind organism is the destiny of that body-mind organism stamped according to my concept at the moment of conception. At the moment of conception, God's will is stamped on that conception. And if it is God's will and the destiny of that conception not to be born, that conception will be aborted willingly or unwillingly. But if it is the destiny of that conception to be born as a human being, then how long that born object will last, what will be its lifespan, and what will happen to that born object during that allotted lifespan, every single moment, is determined according to God's will, and the destiny of that conception according to my concept.
Thank you.
Most welcome. Yes.
Is a misunderstanding the understanding?
I'm sorry?
Is a misunderstanding the understanding then?
I'm sorry, I don't. I think your question is too deep for me. You said misunderstanding the understanding.
I will put it in other words.
Please,
yes. Yeah.
please.
We circle around the doer, not the doer. And we always come to the same problem. Explaining by meaning. With every problem we have. So, therefore I said, the misunderstanding or the problem is the understanding. Understanding by meaning. Building means. It's simple, I think. Isn't the conclusion isn't it a neither nor or nor neither?
I'm sorry, please.
Isn't it a nor neither? Not both of yes and not. We always circle with every explanation with the two sides of the coin. And as long we circle around,
yes,
this is understanding.
So it is a vicious circle, like a dog chasing his own tail, trying to find an explanation
Yes.
which the human intellect, it is impossible for the human intellect to know.
Yes,
The
that's
human
again-
intellect is part of this body-mind object. And that created object can never know the basis on which the creator's subject's will functions.
The
A created object can never know the basis on which God functions.
yes.
Or the created object can never know the basis of the cosmic law.
To every question, the mind wants to give a yes and no.
That's right. And that is the
Is
problem.
that the problem? Yes.
That is, I agree entirely.
And that's the problem of understanding. Understanding, in my experience, is a sense which creates you and I. But it's mere sense.
Tell me if my concept of that, what you are trying to say, I think, is that any explanation, any knowing is based on a subject-object relationship.
Cause and effect, yes.
A subject wants to know the object. If you want to know mathematics, you are the subject and mathematics is the object. If you want to know some person, you are the subject and the person is the object. And if he wants to know you or understand you, he is the subject and you are the object. So in phenomenality, any knowing, any understanding, the basis is subject-object relationship.
Yes.
Whereas if you want to know something about God, what happens is an object usurping the subjectivity of the pure subject, and worse still, turning the pure subject into an object which the pseudo-subject wants to know.
But what happens? We create an object like God, and we are searching for it.
And suffering thereby.
Yeah?
That's all. So, if the suffering is the destiny of this body-mind organism, this vicious circle will go on until it stops when it is supposed to stop,
And that's the exit of
according
understanding.
to God's will or the cosmic law. Until then, it will go on.
But last sentence, and therefore I said, somehow in this revealing the exit from the sense of understanding, circling, this is what you described.
As a subject-object relationship. And subject-object relationship can only prevail in phenomenality, where the subject-object relationship can exist. Because each person is the subject, and for that
Of building plus and minus, and it is there every moment, no answer comes.
So, what I am saying is the subject-object relationship can only exist in phenomenality. But that subject-object relationship cannot exist between a created object and the creator subject. You see?
I know what you mean.
Thank you.
Easy question came up to my mind when I listened to you answering those questions. If I'm not satisfied with my program, okay, I don't like my program for those years. so is there any technique? Is there any technique to have at least a little bit influence?
In other words, what you are saying is a created object wants to influence the creator subject. A created object wants to influence the creator subject. The creator subject who has already determined the destiny of that created object.
Ramesh, I do not understand. Sorry? No, I do not understand this. What is an object? And I'm totally not familiar with.
Look, all right.
With your,
now,
with
if
your
I'll tell you,
wording.
if you are a sculptor, and you create a sculpted figure, human figure, then the figure which you have created is the created object, and you are the creator subject. Similarly, God or the source is the creator subject, and we, all human beings as objects, are created by the creator subject. Therefore, every human being, as I said, is a uniquely programmed object. And then created object can never know the basis on which the will of the creator subject functions. So we can never possibly know the will of God. And this is the problem sometimes arises. Someone says, and has said, He said, look, Ramesh, I don't want to go against God's will. But I don't know God's will. You see the problem?
So
I don't want to go against God's will, but I don't know God's will.
So with other words,
So the answer is, my answer is, but God knows His will. You don't worry about it.
so
Do whatever you like. Honest, do whatever you like. If it happens because not because you liked it, but God wanted it.
so there is no way for any influence on my program. So
Very
there is
sorry, but
technique.
no.
I didn't understood very well what you were telling about women. When I understood you well, you said that a woman was programmed
No, what I'm
to
what-
get children.
Yes. No, what I said was an interpretation which I read in a book, which was given to me. It was written by a clergyman. And the clergyman said, it is not God's will that any woman should not be married and have children. But if it happens, then it is not God's will, but it has happened because of circumstances beyond his control. You see? So, his interpretation is, then if God has done it, He has done it so that that woman can learn something from that situation. So it is up to the woman, it is, in other words, it is up to any human being to learn from circumstances created by God for that human being, to learn.
Yes. So when a woman doesn't get children, that's also a situation what is programmed by God.
That is what I am saying.
Yeah, okay, then
That
I
is,
understood well.
that is exactly what I am saying. Therefore, my point is, if a woman who is not programmed to be strong enough to resist temptation, if a woman is programmed not to be strong enough to resist temptation and falls for the temptation, then my point is she is not committing any sin.
And it's not like this that the source.
That is my concept.
Okay, the source. It's not so that the source.
Because whatever happens,
changes his mind after he created a female machine.
I'm sorry?
It's not like the source changes his or her mind after he creates a
No,
female
you see,
machine.
let me give another metaphor. What I see, life is a movie that is already created. The movie, the script of which is written by God, it has been produced and directed by God. Every character in the movie is played by God, and it is God who is witnessing the movie. Why should God make any changes in the movie?
But why does he create a female machine who doesn't do what she has to do as that machine?
I told you, a created object cannot know the basis on which the creator subject functions.
Thank you.
We can only accept what is, and again, Meister Eckhart's words, they're marvelous. I mean, see, all that the human being can do is to wonder and marvel at the magnificence and variety of God's creation. My wife and I often sit and watch the Discovery Channel or National Geographic Channel. And honestly, it's mind-boggling. They sometimes show the sea world. You see. And the variety, every time I see it, I remember my Meister Eckhart's words. The variety of it, there is one scene I particularly remember. There is a small fish, swimming along merrily. And by the time he is midway between on the TV screen, a big fish comes up with a monopoly. That is life.
What has this to do with the female machine?
The small fish doesn't even have the time to ask God. Why?
The life is a game, and God plays its why.
I'm sorry?
The life is a game, and God plays the game. Play the game.
That's the point. God plays the game.
Yes, but why?
Pardon?
Why?
Why? Well, let me put it this way. God is potential energy. Think in terms of a potential energy. So what you are asking is, why did the potential energy activize itself into this manifestation? Why did the potential energy activize itself into this manifestation? Because it is the nature of the potential to activize itself. If the potential never activized itself, potential wouldn't be potential, it would be dead matter. So it is the nature of the potential to activize itself sometime. So the potential energy has activized itself into this manifestation and its functioning.
You say everything happens according to the cosmic law.
Yes.
Right? So
That is my concept.
yes, according to your concept. So, like when a stone falls, it also falls down because that happens according to the law that a stone falls, right?
Yes. And that law is part of the cosmic law.
Yes. So the stone doesn't find itself in the situation where it does not know what to do, or should I fall or shouldn't I fall, right?
Because that stone has not been given the dubious gift of intellect. The human being has been given this dubious gift of intellect.
That was my question. How is it possible? I also function according to the law, just like a stone. So how is it possible that I find myself in a situation where I have no idea what I should do or shouldn't do or what's going on, And
Yes, but you see, I told you, the answer is extremely simple. Do, and I'm not joking, I'm not being flippant. I'm as serious as I can be. Do whatever you like, because whatever you like at the moment is exactly what God wants you to like.
Yeah, but if I don't know what I like?
Then you flip a coin.
Ramesh, I have just two small questions. The first is it right to close it? Is it right to say in terms of your concept that what I call my world is just a construction of the function of my brain?
Yes, that's right.
That's right. And the other question is, we have a lot of descriptions of holy men and experiences of such holy men and women. such
holy men and women?
Yes. Descriptions like leaving your body, that the mind of the holy man is able to leave the body. You understand?
No.
We have descriptions like Jesus walking upon water.
You see, even the mind, if it has achieved by certain practices, yoga practices or whatever, and has achieved certain powers, then those powers can be achieved by those means, if it is God's will, by a holy man or an unholy man. You see, it's like you go to a gymnasium, you have a workout exactly as you are told by your instructor. 3-6 months, you will have muscles. So you have to do this yoga as it is to be done, and you will have yogic muscles, which are powers. So I'm not saying that there are no yogic powers. Of course there are yogic powers. But whether anybody's efforts will be successful or not will be God's will. And how that body-mind organism will use those powers is also God's will.
Yes, my question was whether such yoga powers exist or not. And I understand you're right that there exist possibilities of our mind which are beyond that what we as normal human beings have or realize. Is it true?
You see, my information is that yogic powers are possible and they have been achieved. All I'm saying is, wherever those yogic powers have been achieved, then they were achieved because it was God's will that those body-mind organisms were successful in their yogic efforts to achieve those powers. And how those people will use those powers, to what ends and to what consequences, is also God's will. So yogic powers are certainly possible. It's been proved, it's been known.
Okay, thank you.
Yogic powers are certainly possible, yes.
Is the energy of the source growing by all the experience the source gets, by all the...
I'm sorry, who's speaking?
Excuse me, please.
Shall we make that the last question, please?
Okay. Is the energy of the source growing by all the experience the source gets by all the many different body-mind organisms?
Can you repeat that, please?
Changes the quality of the source by the experience the source gets of the body-mind organisms. Does it get more or bigger or more energetic, the source? Because the source gets much experience.
The source gets bigger through the experiences of the body-mind mechanisms. Does it change
that's right.
the source?
You mean whether anybody can learn from experience?
No, I mean, does the source, gets the source bigger, or the energy of the source, gets it more by the experience of the different, by its own experience?
So, that's what I think what you mean is, can a person learn from experience?
No, the source.
No?
Can source learn from experience? He's saying, does the source become bigger?
Look, the source has...
the all-knowing source.
Yeah.
Is it
Oh,
like
wait a minute, you have just said all-knowing.
Yes.
Then why should it need to know anything else? The all-knowing source.
Yes.
Why does it have to know anything more from anybody else?
Yes.
all-knowing source is correct.
But if the knowledge, is it not possible that the knowledge gets more? Or is the knowledge constant?
The source is the only reality. Other than that, everything else is an appearance which has emerged from that source. And a beautiful example is given in a Hindu scripture. He said, the source creates the manifestation, like the spider creates the web from its own saliva. So the source has created the manifestation from within itself. Other than the source, nothing exists. So the source had no other material in order to create the manifestation. So everything that has emerged from the one single source, which is the reality, which is the only reality. Source is the only reality. Everything else is an appearance, which has emerged from the source.
Thank you.
Okay.